Tacky Talk time. This is the first Tacky Talk, by the way, of March 2023 with State Representative Tacky Chan of Quincy. Hey, Tacky, happy March.
Happy March, Joe. It's moving into a new season, we hope. But then again, it could snow again this weekend.
This is climatological or meteorological spring, I am told. So anything that happens now, even if it's a snowstorm, it's going to be a spring snowstorm.
I mean, we all grew up here, so the meteorological seasons don't make any sense to us anyway.
The lines are very blurred. That's right. It snowed in May one year, I remember. So anything could happen.
Well, I know. Obviously, I remember the April Fool's storm is the one that's strongest on everyone's memory in the right age bracket. But I was talking to my colleagues in Western Mass, where the state has to say voting on supplemental budget, and was describing who has how much snow, and of course, the ability to work from home, like we're doing here, chatting. Has really changed how state of emergency works. The governor did not declare state of emergency, actually. She declared that people that can work remote will work remote because you have the ability to work remote in case the storm gets really bad. However, if you couldn't work remote, you have to come in.
Yeah, exactly.
Essentially, that's what they said. I mean, obviously it said specifically Mass DOT and RMV and those guys, how to work something out. But all the emergency management people obviously goes in during the storm because it's a statewide issue. They obviously are essential personnel. Obviously, law enforcement essential personnel. But I mean, most folks that are administrative staff style work. I mean, we have this laptop and you've been working from home. You're going to go home and we expect you to do your job and show up the next day. So we did that at the State House as well, even though, quite honestly, it was not a real snowstorm yesterday.
Thankfully.
Which I kind of laughed about when I looked at it. I was like, this ain't bad. But I mean, this technology lets us err on the side of caution that we wouldn't have before. I'm still old enough to remember when there was state emergencies, and I was happy being non-essential personnel. And we had no cloud access. We had no email. We didn't have voicemail. We didn't have any of the things you have today that has expanded during the COVID world. And actually, this leads to a good question in the long run, is whether or not snow days are a thing that pass for kids going down the line.
Yeah, I actually, one of the things that came out of this recent event was I didn't realize that the state education department does not currently allow remote learning to count as toward a real day in school.
Yeah, I suspect those will be revisited as time goes along. Obviously, we're not like Maine, where they still they go to school unless there's like more than a foot. I mean, it's Maine. I mean, these folks are hardy snowgoers, especially as further north you go. But I mean, I suppose I wouldn't say it's going to happen near term, but I suppose it's something that will be considered by school districts and Department of Education at some point, where to make sure that everyone gets out of school on time within the statutory allowed requirement days, that perhaps if it is possible to remote learning, because as we all aware, not everybody has equal access to internet. Right. And honestly, not every child and family has equal access to technology either. The technological divide, even in a wealthy state like ours, is still very, very real.
Oh yeah, especially I'm sure in your colleagues in Western Mass in the rural areas, that would be their first argument.
Well, also people in different parts of the socioeconomic scale too.
Yeah.
People who are unable to have a technology to allow to have a computer with Zoom, for example. Just because you have an older computer, it doesn't always mean it's going to work right. For example, I've had older tablets and I couldn't use them on Zoom during COVID, and hence you all were looking at me through one of these things with Joe. Because I couldn't find a tablet if I wanted to find one in 2020. I mean,
that's right. Yeah,
I would have to go steal somebody's equipment. I mean, it was just such a shortage. But I mean, reality is that not every family can have the latest device, and the state, as you all found out, I didn't get my state device to 2021 November, which is a long time for us to make an acquisition
for electronics. Yeah, these days it is. Yeah.
Yeah, which allows me to actually communicate this way and also I can work more effectively from home to my desktop computer. So because this device is more secure, it is a state device, it has already preloaded all the access to the cloud servers. at the State House. It is designed that if someone steals it, it basically erases itself. So I mean, you always want a secure work device. So, but for families, remote learning is still an economic barrier for some folks, as well as you correctly point out, is a technology barrier in broadband, even in urban areas, even in Boston, because a lot of this stuff is wired in the ground. Not everybody in Boston even has equal access, and if you go to the Cape, it can be equally challenging. But this is something that we definitely need to continue to address. I mean, we've been talking about this and pouring tens of millions of dollars into this issue every year, but tens of millions ain't a lot of money. I mean, in terms of internet broadband, and technology moves fast. So, I suspect at some point there'll be a conversation about this. I wouldn't expect it anytime soon. The technology divide is something the school system must consider if they want to do any kind of remote learning to count towards a completion of a school year. Mm-hmm. But I think it's worthy of discussion, regardless by school districts as well as the Department of Education. But like I said, I wouldn't believe it's going to happen immediately because of the economic divide.
Right. Well, as you mentioned, things are starting to get active again at the State House, and I guess the biggest news this week was the proposed budget from the governor.
Yeah, like every governor, regardless of political party, it's a suggestion, and we file it, and then we're going to do our own thing because we're the House, and the Constitution says the House is the first body that makes an appropriation. So,
So it's her wish list. It's her wish list, basically.
Yeah, this been working on budgets since '96, so it's always been a wish list. I discovered after when I was staffing, discovered in the first year, hey, this doesn't matter, does it? It was like, no. People were telling me, no, it really doesn't matter. It's just a recommendation, not a full-blown we're going to do this. But also gives a bit of a guidepost too. For example, you have to have a general idea what different state agencies are looking for funding. Right now public hearings are starting on Monday with the Ways and Means committees. They do it jointly. Senate Ways and Means will jointly do hearings to do around the state like we had in the past. The vice chair and assistant vice chair would chair a few of those hearings when the chair is not available. And the state agencies and constitutional officers are expected to sit before the Ways and Means Committee and basically answer questions. And I'm not on Ways and Means anymore, but I have been on Ways and Means. And one of the advantages of being on Ways and Means is that as a member, you can ask constituent issues, functional issues, anything comes to mind. You've got a bone to pick with a state agency. Being a member of Ways and Means gives that grand opportunity. They got the secretariat or the constitutional officer in front of you. And, they can try to dodge your question, not answer your question, but you have the ability as a committee member to, hey, look, what's really going here? My folks in this community is having X problem. Why can't you deal with this? And you can put people on the spot. So then the stuff's not, we'll be streaming on MAlegislature.gov. It never gets part of the news cameras unless it's really juicy and there's like a full-blown fight. So you never see those on the news cameras. And unlike C-SPAN, it tends to be a little bit more orderly, and the combat is not nearly as vicious as watching C-SPAN. So it's a little, as I'm saying, it's kind of dull, but I mean, we'll see what the
practical though.
Practical. So we'll see how it goes. My friend is the committee chair, Consumer Protection Professional Legislature, and I do reach out to agencies that I interact with, Office of Consumer Affairs, Division of Occupational Licenses, the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission, the State Lottery, and other folks that we have some oversight on, and we'll talk to those secretariats and their staff about, why they are asking what they're asking for, and then I can check in Ways and Means about, hey, what are you guys thinking here? Because we've been asked, this is the explanation we received. What do you guys, what are you guys thinking on your side? And good committee chairs, do look into the budgets of agencies they interact with. And obviously, if we're not happy with the agency, we'll make a different recommendation than the agency wants to hear. I've had a very brief conversation with Secretary Yvonne Howe, the new Secretary of Economic Development, and we'll be having a follow-up meeting soon to discuss her transition into private sector, finance industry, into government, as well as my thoughts of how things work or used to work. Again, I've started to become the State House historian. It's like to put else, I've become State House old.
Any questions you have, just go to Jackie. He's been around for so long. He'll have the answers for you.
Yeah, there's a little bit of truth to that these days.
So what do you think about, well, the headline grabbing story this week is the free community college for people 25 and older with a price tag of about 20 million, which surprised me. I thought it'd be much more than that.
Yeah, 25-ish million dollars doesn't sound like it's very sufficient. I suspect this is more of a pilot style program where I don't know what the criteria is. I mean, they just listen to age. They didn't really go through the criteria. I suppose a lot of it's going to be done by regulation. And obviously it's for people who are unable to go back to school for whatever reason. It reminds me a bit like Youth Build and the GED program that we fund. We do fund adult basic education. We've been doing adult basic education longer than I've been in government. Most people don't realize this, that the state does fund programs to get your GED. There were programs, I think at one time, long time ago, there were programs at Quincy College that was state
I think
funded.
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Youth Build is another program where young adults now, for whatever reason, couldn't finish high school. And then they got the GEDs via the Youth Build program, and they learned a trade skill in the process. To me, that logic, the community college logic leaps off that logic. The difference is volume, right? Overall, Massachusetts' graduation rate is good. I mean, this is one of the better educated states in the nation. I would pit any school district here against any school district in the South in particular. I always say that if you look at some of these other places, and the quality of education and the crazy political divide now that's education's become, which doesn't happen here, where people don't realize when you make public policy and education, and it disrupts the whole system because as I'm reminded by school teachers, the second graders are only good as a first grade teacher.
Yeah.
And the third graders are only good as a second grade teacher. And you start making massive political statements in schools. It creates all kinds of disruption because of the way the system's set. You can make educational changes regarding improvements of how you educate. But, you start making political decisions on education. It can really be very disruptive because now you have brand new stuff as opposed to curriculums that were designed, tested, and piloted somewhere, and you have an idea how it works before you go put it in front of your children. So, Massachusetts is pretty good about not getting into that level of education advice. The social issues regarding bullying and interactions with kids and extracurriculars, that's a separate issue. I mean, in the classroom, learning is fairly good here. And, I can't tell what the graduated Massachusetts. I would have to Google it up pretty quickly.
I don't know either. Yeah.
Chat GDP it up, depending on what we want to use. The AI can probably tell me, fast. But I mean, I do understand that there's an economic challenge to go to college. We all know this. I mean, we talk about student loans, student debt. Anybody with kids staring down, that big number down the road. Obviously we've talked about the Biden student loan initiative. Things like, I don't think he's going to get his $20,000 forgiveness. That ain't looking good because I think you're going to say it's government overreach again, which I think the courts has been pulling back the presidential powers, saying it's overreach. But you have teaching student loan forgiveness, public service loan forgiveness, which is from I believe it was a George W. Bush era program that was never properly implemented. You got to put 10 years in and we have to be part of the federal program, and that can help out. But again, as a guy that works in public service, and those of your teachers know that the starting pay ain't that great. So you got to kind of rough it out, moving up the pay scale while trying to, get your 10 years payment in to try to get your loans forgiven.
Right.
But, it's at least you're working towards your loan end. So I get it. What the governor's trying to do. It's not a terrible idea. Like I said, we do this in adult basic education to start with. The question is, what the criteria is, for you to complete your community associate program at community college. or you're trying to work from associate to a 4-year program, and what do you do next? And not to say this is, I don't have the statistics either, but I mean, obviously, folks, I mean, even adult basic education, everybody finishes about adult basic education to get the GED. Some people do drop out the GED program because life happens.
Mhm. Right.
So I think that's the other concern is that, while there's an expectation in GED programs, there'll be attrition just because life happens. There'll be attrition at the community college proposal. I don't know, like I said, it's an intriguing program. It kind of piggybacks off an existing program we've had for many, many decades. The cost differential obviously is very different because I think the ADE English second language programs, average between 27 and 35 million statewide. But it's not just the ADE, that includes English second language programs around the state too. So, but I mean, a lot of, like I said, we have a good graduation rate at high school. For the reason you can't get your 4-year degree or 2-year degree, it's going to be more than 25 million.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's what I thought too. It's an introductory offer from the governor. It sounds like.
Yeah, at least I'm very intrigued by this. It's not a terrible idea. Like, what if it's tied to a GED program, for example? You finish your GED, you're like 27 years old or 28 years old, and you finally got your high school equivalent diploma, and you decide, I want to do the next thing. Things like Youth Build, for example, got you a steady job in the trades. You have some stability, but no financial means. So you're just, on the edge, but you made the strong effort to complete a program. Maybe there's a continuation there. Like I said, I'm just shooting off the top of my head here. Okay,
right,
folks?
right. No, but I see what you're saying. It kind of creates a continuing pathway to finish your education.
Yeah, again, I'm shooting off the top of my head.
Right.
Using a program.
That's what we do here on Tacky Talk, Tacky.
Yeah, I just throw ideas out, folks. I'm not saying it's going to happen.
That's right.
But that could be, you're right. A logical, perhaps we'll do a logical conclusion to that program. Listen, I don't know. I find it very intriguing. I do think the price tag is a little low if it's fully utilized. But I mean, I think it's worth discussion. It really is.
Okay. All right. Also, a supplemental budget presented this week as well, which is that supplement to what, Tacky?
Well, we're paying some bills and we're doing some bond authorizations that we didn't get done last year. So it's about $355 million of supplemental money, of which 255 is net, meaning that's like real money. The other 10 million is moving money around between accounts. And then we have about $500-ish million in bonds for things that we need to get done. So, for example, the Mass Works program is about $300 million. It's a job training program that's run out of money, and we refund this. We refill this program, every 2 to 4 years, depending on the need. It's running out of money. So the governor needs to keep this Mass Work programs going. That's about $300 million of the $500 million. The other big ticket items, as you probably see in the news, is the SNAP program, the federal government supplemental food stamp / SNAP. We call it SNAP now, Supplementary Nutrition Assistance Program. You guys know it's food stamps. Runs out. They did a supplemental program throughout COVID. It ends this March. This happened to us last year regarding school breakfasts.
That's right.
For every 1 year of a school breakfast, which we did have to do in supplemental budget. And we baked it into the budget, which is part of our permanent program. We talked about school lunches. We're interested in seeing if we can bake it into the main budget as well as a long-term program. We're trying to figure out if we can do that or not. Those are kind of big ticket items that, need to be addressed right away. The other big financial item is actually the continuation of refugees coming to this country. The Afghan and Haitian refugees are still coming in as the U.S. Department, the U.S. government, between, in the case of the Afghans, they have like a State Department, Defense Department, and, ICE component. It's a little bit trickier, complex Afghan situation. As more Afghans are trying to get out of the country, and those are displaced still around the world. I mean, imagine, you had to flee your country and you're displaced in a tent for how long? Before the U.S. government can find a place to place you. In Massachusetts, most people don't realize, is a major refugee destination for the U.S. government. Oddly enough, states in the Midwest, the Northeast corridors, most of them tend to be okay in terms of economic development states. They tend to be a little bit wealthier states. Do take designated refugees. I do understand that migrant issues on the border or a different conversation. But I mean, there's this narrative going around that these wealthier states don't feel the impact of migration, and that's true. We don't have people just randomly showing up on our borders, but we do take a lot of refugees that those other states don't take the same amount of refugees.
Well, there are already social service agencies in place in states like ours to deal with that, and other states don't have that support.
Yeah, we've been doing this for many, many, many decades. I mean, it's my friends from Cambodia and Vietnam who are refugees from the 70s, 80s into the 90s. I mean, a lot of them enter a place like Minnesota.
Mm.
And then Minnesota would be the start point, and then they would migrate to Massachusetts. And that's where a lot of our Southeast Asian population comes from. We have a huge Nepalese population on temporary visas still, post a massive earthquake as a type of refugee. I mean, the Afghans, here, I mean, the Iraqis are here. A lot of folks are in Massachusetts you just never realized or thought about. And they're going to continue to keep coming. So, we put more money in the supplemental budget to supplement what the feds have provided us regarding this program. And the Massachusetts Office of Immigrants and Refugees, has a lot of work. They've been working very hard. Our good friend Mary Trong, we've known her for many, many years. Herself is a refugee. She's very familiar with the process the federal government set up, as well as the local service agencies. And it isn't kind of like, drop and run. We social service agencies working in the federal government and the state, have to come up with a plan here. And no surprise, folks, you guys know what the problem is. It's got housing.
Yep, absolutely. So we've seen it, manifest itself in these temporary housing shelters at hotels and motels across the state.
Yeah, exactly. You guys are all where it is. It's housing. And that's the single biggest challenge of refugee populations is to find housing and then, get them situated. They need English classes. Again, we talked about English classes a bit before the GED, ESL. Then, we got identified work training. And then, of course, obviously mass transit is important, but you also get a driver's license at some point too. So, it's a lot of moving parts involved, and not every, refugee can qualify for a driver's license. They have to go to driving school, if that's the case. But if you're making no money, driving school ain't cheap. So, there's a lot of things involved here. But, I remind folks, particularly the Afghan refugees, these are folks that, were supporters of the U.S. government.
Yep. That's right. Yeah, it's important to point out the difference between refugee and migrant. The two totally. One is your life is in danger. You have to get out.
And in some cases, migrants are in danger. I mean, immigrants are trying to get up from Central or South America. Whether they're cartels and
True.
lift stakes and run because the local government is unable to curtail the challenges associated with fighting cartels, or there's a civil war like in Venezuela. Again, there's still opposition to the government down there, and you got to flee, and you don't have time to get a passport because the government is run by a dictator, and you could get shot trying to go get a passport if you're in the opposition party, and you got to run for it because they're hunting for you. Most people here, unless you grew up in that environment or lived through those environments, have no idea.
Yeah.
And let's be frank about it, folks. I mean, we can't relate to that. If you've never been hunted, and then you need to find a better life, and you get to the Texas border.
Yeah, you're right. It's hard for us to put ourselves in those shoes. Thankfully, right?
Those folks that listening, perhaps you've been through this. Understand, you can relate what's going on, but I mean the vast majority just have no idea.
Let's talk about the tax relief proposal that now the House Speaker seems to support parts of. At least he publicly came out on that finally.
But the Speaker likes to review as opposed to talk about public policy off the top of his head. I'm fully aware the Speaker says a lot of things off the top of his head. But you may have noticed that his editorial comments are very rarely or never actually regarding new public policy. He's not had a chance to review. Stuff that he's already seen and vetted and has an understanding of, he sometimes can be a little colorful about how he talks about this. Or, there's always a little bit of a quip, and people keep asking about that oatmeal cookie he had during a press conference. And
let that go. Let's move on.
I still got people asking me that. I'm like, he wanted a cookie. I don't see a kind of political interpretation of a man that wants to have a cookie. He just happened to have his cookie. He's not gonna stuff his face out, chipmunk face full of cookie. I mean, going out the Senate lobby. I mean, it's like, come on, folks. So I'm surprised it hasn't been turned into a meme yet. Maybe there is one. They just haven't looked.
Maybe there is one. We're not going to do that here. That's for sure. But I think
So-
he did indicate some support for like changes to the estate tax, capital gains tax, things like that.
Well, I mean, some of this stuff is already stuff we already put out last year. As you know, I was
Right.
very proud and supportive of the fact that we put out increased the rental deduction. That will help a little bit on people on tenants. I mean, that's what the point of rental deduction is. We haven't changed that as far as I'm aware of, because I actually know a little bit about how to fill out a tax form, believe it or not. And I don't remember that ever changing in my lifetime. The state tax is definitely something, I've been very supportive of. Talked a lot about it as well. The fact that we tax you on the whole amount once you get past $1 million in estate tax, which is ridiculous. Other states provide a deductible. We proposed 2 million. I believe the governor is looking at 3. I'm sure we can work out something here. This is not a surmountable goal to deal with. Some other stuff is kind of new. I mean, changing short-term gains, capital gains tax from 12 to 5%. I know the business community has been asked for that. Obviously, the governor's looking for a compromise. I think we need to review that a little more closely. This can be used to offset the impact of the so-called millionaire's tax, of which we don't even know what the implementation is. So that's kind of some of the thought process there, particularly from the business community that's been pushing that. I've been looking for something. I got stuff bill I'll be filing soon. Very much more pedestrian looking regarding the deductible and interest dividend incomes. Right now in the state tax, if you're a single individual, you pay $100. You can get $100 deductible on your interest and dividends, and $200 if you're a married couple. Not surprising. Interest rates have been bloody awful, right? So nobody's paying interest tax until now. You can find a lot of young people online banking. You can find a 3.4 to almost close to 5% high yield savings accounts.
Yep.
Depending on those conditions with some of these, I do understand that, but the fact there's availability for that, you can't get past $100 deduction on interest, and it hasn't been changed since 1971. So we're working on a bill now in the office. We're going to file soon to increase the amount to $500, $1,000 for a couple. I'm just picking a number because if you count inflation, it's probably close to $600. But round numbers are nice. And I'll float that proposal out as a bill, and when we get to discussion of the tax proposal, I can file as an amendment. And again, I'm not married to exactly $500, but you got to have a number to start a conversation, right?
Right. Yeah, and they have to, more accurately reflect the economic climate of the day.
Yeah, and this helps more like people like you and me and your neighbors and people listening here, because it's unlikely you're going to have massive capital gains for many of us in Quincy, but you will accrue a lot more interest income. And like I said, younger folks, like online banking, and mortar banks aren't for them. And, these online banks have low overhead because they're less physical plant, and they try to attract people away from, Bank of America by offering much higher savings interest rates versus, the 0.1 to 0.2 to, point whatever you're getting at some of these brick and mortar banks versus, like Capital One or Vanguard or others. Citibank's another one that's doing it now, that's offering a minimum 3.4%.
Yeah, you just have to be careful of fees and certain restrictions with withdrawals and checks written against them, things like that.
Yeah, pay attention to footnotes, because you see online they have to fully disclose, because the feds will go get them if they don't. But you see these little footnotes, definitely scroll to the bottom of the screen as soon as you get everything. And I know the print's super tiny. You can use Zoom on your web browser to make it much bigger to look at. Or you can cut and paste it and put into a Word document and zoom up that way. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. Read those little footnotes to see what the exact criteria are. But certain places like Citibank is offering you money cash back to move a certain amount of money. If you make a minimum, they're going to give you money back. And that money, by the way, is taxable. It's not a rebate. So, just be aware that's considered interest income for tax purposes.
Right.
We're looking like up to like $250 in some cases on cash back.
Yeah, I mean, it can be significant. Just you made a good point too about the feds. Be sure it's FDIC insured before you do anything.
Absolutely. You want to make sure you got all those criteria, but guys like Capital One,
They are, yeah,
using them as an example. I mean, they are a bank.
right,
Citibank has the word bank in it.
right.
So I mean, there's already that out there. So
Yeah,
there
all
may
your major institutions for sure. Yeah, just be aware of like investment bankers, things like that.
Yeah, investment bank is different. They have, if you have your money in a brokerage account, they're not FDIC insured. There are requirement to have a different type of insurance. They have to carry separately from FDIC. So your brokerage accounts are insured, like the big reputable ones, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, JP Morgan. I mean, the big ones are reputable ones, are required to carry it. Small ones require to carry it too, but you don't know what's going on. The
Right, right,
guarantee
right.
ones
Yeah.
will
So,
definitely.
and credit unions are a good option too. They have a separate insurance, but they're a good option too.
Absolutely. So, I mean, right now, cash is king, folks. I mean, the markets are crazy. I'm sure people with the 401ks, 57s, 403bs, and your personal investments that you're saving for yourself, or perhaps like for your grandkids or kids. You have these little mutual funds set up. I mean, it's been a rocky ride the last 3 years now. People look like geniuses in 2021, and 2022, you look like you don't know what you're doing. And now 2023, we still don't know what we're doing. But cash is king. I mean, you're seeing CD interest rates, online interest rates you can find through a brokerage account. Um, Somewhere in the areas like a 1 month at like 4.7%. The 6 month and 9 month CDs, are at 5, but the Fed's treasuries are over 5% as well. And you buy a UST bond, there is no state tax.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, short-term treasury bonds are being extremely popular. We have this thing called you've heard this before, and use the inverse yield curve. In simple terms, the inverse yield curve basically says that if the long-term interest rate is lower than the short-term interest rate, basically anything 1 year or less, is considered inverse yield curve, because people would not be inclined to put the money in a 5-year T bond or any other bond, period, any bond, because it yields less money than you would if you put into a short-term bond, meaning that anything less than a year. That's kind of the real simplified, super simple explanation for that. So it's considered inverse yield because normally the yield curve is that you want to keep your money longer, so they offer a higher interest rate to keep your money longer. So bank CDs, treasury bonds, and so forth. So it's an indicator that people, one, the banks need money because they wouldn't offer you such a big interest rate. They need to increase the deposits. And secondly, people are trading bonds at a high rate, and they're not strong faith in the stock market.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's, again, a sign of the times right now, especially, it looks like there's going to be more interest rate hikes later this year, I think, too. The Fed's not quite where it wants to be in terms of labor force, workforce development, and unemployment.
Yeah, there's a lot of guesswork of what's going on there with the Feds. The Federal Reserve, I'm not very envious of the position. People think it's like a simple decision to raise interest rates. It is not. They're looking at data. The data is always lagging by a minimum 1 month minimum lagging, and there is a correction done 1 month later. For example, some of the December numbers regarding sales was not as good as it was before in December sales, and the December CPI was below when it was corrected 2 months later. It was actually a tenth of a percentage point lower, actually higher than it was originally put out in December. So there's this real problem that the Feds have to try to change interest rates using the lagging data. Because, for example, today's March 2nd. We won't have February data to maybe mid-March.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. Same thing, like everything in life, day the month ends, you can't magically find out, all this information about consumer behavior, the cost of manufacturing, all this stuff doesn't magically appear right on the first day of the month. Some of the stuff, is an estimate, and they will be a correction of that, likely in April. Maybe the numbers that came in were accurate. Maybe they're off, but, it's one of those things. So the Fed's really are kind of in a tough spot. We're trying to slow the economy by slowing our spending by increasing interest rates, meaning they're trying to discourage you from not just borrowing money in terms of like buying a house, but also like maybe not use a credit card as much.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And you thought increased saving rates, is a way of us trying to spend less, because if I can get 5% return on my money in 1 year, guaranteed, no questions asked. I suppose at the market where it's the market. I mean, the stock market's kind of all over the place. Why would you put your money in a safe harbor, with guaranteed interest return versus, taking a chance in a rocky market where nobody knows what's going on. So, I mean, that's another way to slow the economy is by increasing saving. And 70% of our economy is driven by consumer spending.
There was a little bit of good news this week. Gas rates are going down.
Yeah, gas rates are going down. Actually, it's kind of interesting between consumer demand, decline at some level, and the as I told you before, it takes time for these refineries and other processes to ratchet up. They just can't do it overnight. We're starting to get our supply chain at a higher level than it was a year ago, and the war in Ukraine is still impacting global oil prices, and hopefully not wheat. It doesn't impact us because we're not an importer of European wheat. We really don't. But I mean, it affects obviously a lot of other countries, especially poor nations in Africa that very depend on Ukrainian and Russian wheat. So hopefully they're able to move that out again by summertime, because again, we can't relate to this, but I mean, some of these countries get zero wheat. We got a food crisis right away. So, but we've adjusted to the current situation economically. The Europeans have used less natural gas overall because of climate change and a much warmer winter. We could say it's climate change. You can say it's a natural cycle. We just got lucky. And even up here in the Northeast, I mean, we had a bit of snow here this week, but I mean, most of it was in Western Mass. But statewide, the snow totals have not been dramatic. This is New England. We could be seeing like a major storm before March is over. So just saying. And obviously, snowpacks are important for us too, because our water tables are tied to snowpacks, so wells and the reservoirs. So we could use some snow. But that being said, it's been relatively mild, and people have been taking advantage of mass save. People have been conserving gas at home. People have been working very hard to try to keep their energy bills down. So, there's a lot of combinations on a global level, as you can hear me say, and also on a domestic level. And certain countries like China, which had a really cold winter spat a month ago, didn't have sufficient natural gas. So they kind of had a rough time, but there's not a supply globally. And the U.S. is one of the biggest exporters of fossil fuels. People don't keep forgetting that we're a major producer of oil and natural gas, and we've been shipping a lot of that to Europe. And I'm sure the industries will look for new markets once the European market has reached a critical mass. They'll probably start looking for other markets as well.
Yeah, is the states going to continue funding that Mass Save program? Do you know, Techie?
Mass Save is paid by your electric and gas bill. It's automatic. Okay. So that's why I encourage people to take advantage of it, because because you're already paying for it as part of your electric gas bills, and it's a shared cost among all ratepayers. I do have some concerns about these type of programs because since everybody has equal access to it, those with greater means can access more of the programs, especially the loan programs. You have greater means, you can take more advantage of the low interest or zero interest loans than someone with less means can. And I've always had with this type of program. While I do encourage everyone to take it, it is not lost on me that not everyone can take advantage of every aspect of it.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, you can get your free light bulbs and water saving devices, but you might not be able to get your house insulated if you can't afford the loan.
Yeah, that's correct. And now with heat pumps, which are not cheap, can you drop, what, 40 grand or whatever, because it's not just a heat pump. You actually have to like change your heating ducts. There's a foundational component because you have to like bolt them in. If you have an existing furnace system, it's already bolted in. So it's not like it's questionable. You got to pull permits depending on the situation and so forth. So it is a project. It isn't like you just yank your furnace out and you just drop it. right? And by the removal of things like a furnaces question, for example, we changed the natural gas like 3 years back. But I still have the oil tank downstairs, and I sealed up the exposed parts of the oil, so I don't have to smell oil in the basement. But eventually, I'm going to have to get that pumped out and removed safely, and have it taken out. But again, that's an additional cost that needs to happen at some point. But I've talked about a lot of times. Everyone's feeling the pinch. I'm no exception.
Yeah, right, exactly. What's the status with the wind projects off the coast right now? Do you know?
Well, the DPU still is looking at the guys. The wind guys are trying to get a revised rate because inflation, especially on material parts.
Hmm.
And with the infrastructure program coming up, the $10 trillion infrastructure program in the United States, steel is going to be a very high competition price. And obviously, we're not going to be importing steel from China. The tariff rates are too high. So, Europeans obviously do not get all their steel from the United States, but they ship over the biggest parts and then assemble it in Massachusetts. So it takes a bit of time to make giant windmill blades, bring them over for assembly, have a plant developed for assembly in the Bedford area. And then obviously it's going to cost them more money, and if they take a negative, if they're in the negative, they're not going to be here. I mean, this ain't complicated. If the material cost outweighs the profits, meaning it destroys the profits, then it's a non-viable project. So
Right.
those very affordable windmill bids from pre-COVID doesn't quite work today's inflationary prices. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out at the DPU, but it's got to be a big consideration, because it's not like we don't want renewable energy, but there is a cost. The transmission line out of Maine is still, I think we're getting there.
Oh, the hydroelectric power.
Yeah, I'm a big hydro guy because I like 99.9% reliability. And that line, I think, is inching a little bit closer every time I ask somebody. It's just not quite over the line on approval. And the state of Maine will not have a lot to say if it gets federal approval. It's just going to happen. And your rates again on the transmission side and some distribution, depending on how they cut it up, will be paying that cost. And actually, it's economic stimulus for a short period of time for states like New Hampshire and Maine, because they need workers to get out there and put this stuff together. It's basically a construction project. So, I mean, there's a short-term economic benefit to those states.
Yeah.
You're paying for, by the way, if your distribution / transmission, depending on how they divvy it up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it behooves everybody for it to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Closer to home here, you're well aware, Tacky, of the fire not too long ago down at Clean Harbors, and how that impacted really the Tri-Town area in the Fall River Basin, and what might come out of that.
Well, I mean, a great job to the Quincy Fire Department and Weymouth and Braintree, and great job by all the communities here. It shows the readiness of our public safety to get the job done. The state does provide $50,000 of hazmat training, and we've been providing equipment thanks to the Quincy delegation to the Quincy Fire Department for many years now for training and updating their equipment for these type of situations. So, that's kind of lost. It never makes the newspaper that we do that. I mean, we do that. We try to put that in a press release out, every budget cycle to the local papers, and people kind of forget that. But it's largely thanks to the speaker, who's been championing that program for a very long time on direct funding from earmarks from us. And of course, the delegation fully supports that. So, not to toot our horn, but somebody paid for that hazmat training, and that's us. So, again, no one ever gives us credit, right? How quickly they forget.
That's why we're here, Tacky.
That's why I love city government. They like to take credit for stuff that we paid for. We'll see how the reevaluation is. I mean, we all know the Fall River Basin is an industrial complex. Those of you remember, there's a gas, coal, oil-fired power plant, depending what decade we're in. You got, the old P&G, which I don't know who owns them now. It is
Twin Rivers now, yeah.
Twin Rivers. They have a huge deep water port that's part of the challenge of the Fall River Bridge, because the Coast Guard acquired that to happen. Remember, guys, well, I don't remember, but I mean, the old days, I mean, had battleships coming in out of Fall River Basin. Hence is why a federal deep water port. And still deep water port ready, as long as a cruise, you can get a cruise liner in there if it can get under the bridge, right?
Right.
And, the bridge does open, as you all know. That can annoy folks from Quincy and Weymouth and Point South trying to get across 3A. I think though, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but definitely could be a reevaluation. I think on a couple of levels. One, I think it's a emergency response well is wonderful. I think coordinated response continues to be something that we do and will continue to do, and we should probably discuss, how to do it more. I'm sure the municipal governments will be trying to figure it out on their own, as well as the fire departments, and we'll see what the EPA standard is regarding, how to deal, and the DEP standards regarding how to handle this. Going forward and measure the air quality and things like that. So I think it's very early stages, what we could be doing. For some reason in my mind, this can't be the first time this happened. I mean, probably before I was alive, this probably did happen at some point.
Yeah, I don't recall, and I've been around a long time. But one of the main questions that came out was the notification process, I think, needs to be more streamlined, if you will, or more homogenized, so everybody gets the same message at the same time.
Yeah, that makes, obviously that is a big part. Given the toxicity of stuff, you want people out of there because of the poor air quality. And obviously the stuff just blows right into the ocean. One of the advantages of being a coastal community, things just blow out to sea. But, until that happens, there's an impact on people's health. And I really don't know what the answer is, largely because of the fact that, you got to get text messages out. You got reverse 911. But a lot of people have cut off the landlines, so that leaves you knocking on doors. I'm sure they got to figure something out that works. It doesn't rise to broadcast company level because that's not a statewide emergency. And even then, who has TVs?
So right. True. Yeah, things have changed so much in the way we communicate. That's actually one of the problems I know that the Fed is having in trying to analyze data is they can't call people as much as they used to survey them because nobody has a phone anymore, a house phone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why pollsters' data has been, I won't say troublesome, but they have to recalculate the formulas of who they can actually reach because they have to reach a certain demographic to have accurate polling. And polling has gotten very complex because of the need to get the right sample size reflecting a demographic. This online poll is crap. Because, you could, make 17 different accounts online and then just kind of like do that. I just find that kind of stupid.
Right. You could be one person answering, 30 different surveys.
Yeah. People find that, it's a pulse of public. It's a pulse of nothing. It is a science to do polling. It is a constant changing of the math because, again, how you communicate people are changing. Everyone uses, talks about 538, which is a very popular site that compiles people polling. They teach you how polling works. I actually heard of audio on NPR about the challenges of polling and themselves try to do polling. And it's even on an academic level regarding things like healthcare, not politics. The polling is challenging. But on simple things like, do you have a job? You don't even have to name which education or attainment, for example, and not talk about where you went to school, what you do for a living, right?
Right.
These are important data points which public policymakers need to know so we can shift our public policy around. Otherwise we're relying on the U.S. Census, which I believe the majority of people are very honest on the U.S. Census. But that data, again, is a lagging indicator. I'm sorry, not lagging indicator. It's an old data set. Because it's already 2003 and the data set was 2020. A lot of stuff's happened in the last 3 years.
That's for sure. Yeah, major shifts in demographics and population. Yeah.
And our lives
has
changed a lot. We don't really notice it till you sit down quietly and think about how our lives have changed. But a lot of things have changed. And the 2020 census is probably not the best data anymore.
Yeah, we won't have a new one until 2030, a federal census at least. Yeah.
Yeah, and be mindful, folks. You will get a federal economic census. They do a census follow-up every so often. two households. Of course, they're doing the science census and making sure they have the correct diversity demographics. The census has also been doing text messages, but again, if you're wary of a piece of mail or a text message, you can reach out to my office and we can try to verify that. And also, you can reach out to Congressman or U.S. Senator's office because it's a federal issue and they can help verify that as well. I'm aware that during COVID, the second half of COVID or wave, whatever, your census was sending out short census forms by text messages to try to get economic data to see, what the employment rate was in certain areas. And I know that people were hesitant to respond to those texts, and rightfully so. I mean, we talk about scams and whatnot. So again, it doesn't hurt to check one of the federal delegation offices. Obviously, you can reach out to us, and we'll reach out to the federal delegation office and try to connect you to them. Obviously check the census website, and in particular, anything, .gov. Hopefully, you can confirm or, whether or not the forms that come to your house or the forms that show up on your phone are correct.
Well, what a natural transition then to ask you how to get hold of you, Tacky.
Well, 617-722 2370, 617-722-2370. We are in the office. Feel free to hit a button. I'm still in room 42. If I'm not there, the staff will be there. Although briefings have returned to the State House, so the staff is running around the State House right now attending briefings because obviously we're off this format in many ways in the State House, or we're doing hybrid versions. So, we're back running around the building. It's nice. You can email me at tacky.chan at mahouse.gov, tacky.chan at mahouse.gov. I think I'm up to somewhere like 400 or 500 co-sponsor requests emails in the last 10 days, which I have to review all of them at some point. So it's going to take a bit of time as I'm trying to figure out what people are trying to tell me. But we are doing a lot of that, and I have been receiving a number of constituent issues, and some of them, not surprising you talked about earlier, is federal government related. We'll do our best to connect you someone in the federal delegation so you can talk to someone and try to expedite you to help you out. Obviously you got State Representative Tacky Chan Facebook. My public hearings will no longer be there. It's going to be at malegislature.gov, which is the legislator's website. And you also have tackychan.org, which is more of a resource page for you to maybe find some phone numbers quickly.
Excellent.
Oh, we got Twitter at TackyChan, which we got that too. So
it's hard not to find you.
Yeah, and we do prioritize. I've said this over and over again. We do prioritize. I mean, based on the urgency of the situation, and also we have transition in government. The appointment of other secretaries. Been talking about that a bit here, but also means they're getting ready to change commissioners and undersecretaries and deputy commissioners, and then obviously a lot of unionized folks will be there. But if you're not unionized, there's a chance that you may not be reappointed. So it's 3 months in. The governor's moved through the top end of the food chain, and now the secretariats in the governor's office will have to start moving down to the lower end of the food chain. And I've been around a lot of transitions, and there's no such thing as a smooth one.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll talk about it all along the way, right here on Tacky Talk.
Absolutely, you can get the real scoop on what real life work is like in my job and the challenge associated with this. I don't think we've, because the last transition was 8 years ago. Obviously, we weren't doing this 8 years ago in this format. So, I mean, yeah, you guys got to hear how things work and the things I deal with.
We'll do it again next week if that's okay.
Yeah, we'll schedule time for next week. Actually, next Thursday is a House leadership meeting at Worcester State College. The speaker is having chairs and vice chairs come out to Worcester State for a day, discussing legislative priorities, discussing how to run some of these committees, discussing how to engage our Senate counterparts, as well as dealing with the rules. The joint rules are in conference committee between the House and the Senate right now, which operates the joint committees. And some of the chairs can share experience and ideas of other newly minted chairs. So next Thursday I'll be out there doing that. I'm not sure what the speaker wants me to do, but As you guys can tell by Tacky Talk, you really just don't want to let me loose. Talking to people, I do know stuff, but sometimes it's not good idea just letting me loose in the public. Much less.
All right, well, we'll check it at some point again soon. How's that?
Yeah, we'll schedule this. Not a concern. We'll make this work.
Okay. Thanks, Tacky.
You're welcome, Joe. Talk to you soon.